Well, earlier in the week, we gave you a look at what went on at one of the largest conferences here in Washington, AIPAC, the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. It was in town, as it is every year, and featured speakers including U.S. President Barack Obama, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Israel's President Shimon Peres. Now, after leaving Washington, President Peres actually headed west to the Golden State, California, to rub elbows with some of the most influential image makers in the world. He took a tour of Google as the personal guest of the CEO and also visited Facebook's Northern California headquarters. And he also said Facebook could even be a realistic way to achieve peace in the Middle East. So we want to show you his new Facebook site.
My friend, for peace, I want to hear your voice.
All right, President Peres' Facebook video there. And as far as his schedule today, he's meeting with none other than Steven Spielberg, and will be hanging out with some of the biggest Hollywood producers, directors, and scriptwriters this weekend. So we want to know, what's the relationship between Israel and Hollywood? Let's talk about that with John Mearsheimer, a professor of political science at the University of Chicago. He also co-wrote the book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. Hey there, John. Let's start here with the large Jewish community, obviously, in Hollywood. But what do you think is the relationship here between Israel and Hollywood?
Well, the fact is that Israel is deeply concerned about its image in the United States. And it's because of its brutal occupation of the West Bank and because of its treatment of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel bad in recent, and Israel is beginning to look like it's the bad guy in the context, who's the president of Israel. The Israeli government is going to great lengths to try and clean up that image and do everything that they can. So it's no surprise that someone like Shimon Peres, who is the good cop in the Netanyahu government, has come to the administration and gone to Hollywood and do everything he can to convince them that Israel is the good guy in the region. And the Palestinians are responsible for the fact that the problem that he faces is that this is not true. Well, and in the age of the internet, it's very hard for Netanyahu and for Peres to disguise what's going on. So
sort of Israel using Hollywood, and we do apologize, we're having a teeny bit of issue with your audio here, but you know, you're saying Israel sort of using Hollywood and using the influence and connections it has there to help it improve its reputation. I know we recently had Max Blumenthal, a writing fellow at the Nation Institute, here in our studios. I want to play just a little bit about what he said, his take on what's going on here.
Pro-Israel supporters in California play the same role that pro-Israel supporters play across the country. They donate to political campaigns to ensure that Democrats and Republicans do pretty much whatever Israel wants. And that's especially true for the Democratic Party, where at the base of the Democratic Party there is increasing dismay and discontentment over Israel's policies.
So what do you think, Professor Mearsheimer? Do you think that this is also an attempt to try to win over some of those people on the left who are starting to question some of Israel's policies?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think everything that Max says is true. Israel has a significant public relations problem, and that problem is only going to get worse with the passage of time because the occupation is going to continue. You're going to end up with a greater Israel. You're not going to have a two-state solution. You're going to have a greater Israel. Israel is going to control all the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And that greater Israel is going to be an apartheid state. It's going to look a lot like South Africa. And more people recognize that. So the Israeli government is doing everything it can in Hollywood, on the West Coast, and as Max said, all over the country.
And I know that
to damage limitation.
And I know that you've actually done extensive research and have written a book on sort of the power of the pro-Israel lobbies as well, some of the influence of the politicians. I know that, you know, President Obama has been accused of not being friendly enough with Israel, of not automatically following AIPAC's agenda. But go into a little detail of us. What were your findings in terms of that pretty strong relationship and the impact it has on policy?
Well, the first point that I would make is that today, Israel and the United States have fundamentally different interests on two issues of great importance. One is the conflict with the Palestinians. President Obama is in favor of a two-state solution, and Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want a two-state solution. On Iran, Prime Minister Netanyahu wants the United States and destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. The last thing in the world that President Obama wants to do is start a war with another country in the Arab and Islamic world. So the question is, what does the Israel lobby do in this circumstance? Does the Israel lobby side with President Obama, or does it side with Prime Minister Netanyahu? As we point out in our book, and is clear from what happened earlier this week in Washington, in almost every case, when the United States and Israel are at loggerheads, the lobby sides with Israel against the President of the United States. And this, of course, is what's happening here.
Even though there's been some pretty interesting polls that have come out that show that the majority of Israel would not back, and to your second point about involvement with Iran, would not back military action against Iran. Only 19% of that country backs it if the U.S. isn't on board with it. So I think that as much as you say Israel does support you know, or the Jewish lobby, or the Jewish lobby supports Israel, there are some other, you know, things, details there that aren't being discussed.
No, but the point is, we're not talking about Israel per se. We're talking about the Netanyahu government. The Netanyahu government runs Israel. And the Netanyahu government is in a position where it can bomb Iran if it wants to. So there's no question that over there are actually lots of Israelis in their national security elite, former heads of Mossad, for example, who are opposed to bombing Iran. Obama's great fear is that Netanyahu and his defense minister, Ehud Barak, who are running the government, United States into a war. That's the key dispute.
John Mearsheimer, we are out of time. Do appreciate you being on the show. Apologize for the audio issues that we have. Interesting stuff here. Professor Mearsheimer is a professor of political science at the University of Chicago.